Welcome to Shatter.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. I wasn't supposed to hear it. She thought I was still outside, taking out the trash. But I'd come back in quietly, just to grab my wallet from the kitchen counter. And that's when I heard her, in the living room, on the phone, laughing. "I don't like him anymore," she said. Just like that. No hesitation. No struggle. I froze. Not because she said it, but because she meant it. The voice on the other end asked something I couldn't hear. Her response came sharp, fast, like she'd been rehearsing it for weeks. "No, I'm serious. I don't like how he talks. I don't like how he dresses. He's boring now." That word, boring, it hit harder than anything else. She wasn't angry. She wasn't hurt. She was just done. Quietly, casually done. The way people get tired of a playlist or throw out last season's clothes. I stood in that hallway, half shadowed by the doorframe, listening to my wife dismantle our life one sentence at a time. And I didn't say a word. Because this wasn't a fight. This was clarity. I walked back out the front door as quietly as I'd come in. Sat in my car. Didn't start the engine. Just sat there staring at the dash, hearing her voice on repeat in my head. "I don't like him anymore. Not I'm struggling. Now we need to talk." Just done. That night, I didn't confront her. I didn't ask for answers or try to salvage whatever was left. Instead, I got organized. I opened a spreadsheet. Started listing the accounts. Checking, savings, utilities, streaming, insurance, everything we had with both names on it. I flagged what was hers and what was mine. Sorted through our debt. Tracked every recurring payment I'd been quietly covering. By 2 a.m., I had a plan. At 4 a.m., I had packed 2 bags. By 5:30, I'd finished the note. Simple. Precise. No emotion. "You said you didn't like me anymore. So now, you don't have to deal with me anymore. You can handle it yourself." I placed it on her vanity, right next to her perfume bottle. The one I bought her last Christmas. Then I took one last look around the house, not out of nostalgia, but to make sure I hadn't left anything that mattered. She was still asleep when I walked out the door. And for the first time in years, I wasn't. I left before the sun rose. The street was still dark. Quiet. Not even the birds had started yet. I didn't look back at the house, not once. I didn't need to. Everything that mattered was already with me. I drove for 30 minutes before stopping. Pulled into a parking lot behind a gas station, turned off the engine, and just sat in silence. Let it settle in. The shift. The end. She'd wake up soon. Walk into the bathroom. Maybe stretch. Maybe yawn. She'd glance at the vanity like she always did and see it. The folded white paper with her name on it. My handwriting. Calm. Sharp. The words would hit her like a car that never honked. Because there's a different kind of pain that comes when the person you thought would always try to fix things finally stops trying. By 9 a.m., the calls started. First 1, then 2. By the 5th, I turned the phone face down and let it vibrate in my lap. She didn't leave voicemails. Just called again. 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 When the messages came, they were short. Disoriented. "Where are you? Is this some kind of joke? Please call me." I didn't reply. I checked into a short-term rental. Small, clean, nothing emotional. 4 walls, a bed, a desk, and peace. That's all I needed. By noon, the tone of her texts had changed. No more confusion. Just panic. "I don't know how to pay the mortgage. Your name's on the utilities. The credit cards are all tied to your income." I read every word. Let them sit. But I didn't respond. She was finally standing in the life she claimed to want, one without me. The debts she used to ignore? They were hers now. The bills I used to manage without credit? Also hers. Because love is quiet when it's real, but responsibility? That's loud when it disappears. By evening, she sent one last message. "I can't do this alone." I replied with just 6 words. "That's not my problem anymore." That was the first time I felt it. Not victory. Not revenge. Clarity. She didn't fall out of love. She stepped out of gratitude. And now she was standing in the echo of her own choices, a place I used to live for years. She thought I would always stay. But men like me don't yell. We pack. We vanish. We rebuild. She tried to regain control the way she always had, by pretending nothing had happened. The next morning, she sent a message that read, "Let's just talk. We've both made mistakes." That was her pattern. Flatten the damage. paint it with neutral language, pull me back into the same loop where I cleaned up the mess, and she got to call it progress. But this time, the loop was broken. I didn't respond. By 10 a.m., she called again. I let it ring. By noon, she texted my sister. Then one of my friends. That's how I knew she wasn't just confused. She was exposed. She was finally realizing she didn't know who I was without access to me. That afternoon, I moved fast. I removed my name from the lease, filed paperwork to separate insurance, redirected all mail, called every company whose bills I'd been silently paying and had them placed under her name. Every single one. The internet, the car note, the water, her phone plan. I wasn't doing it to hurt her. I was doing it to reflect reality. I wasn't her safety net anymore. That evening, she sent a voice message. I didn't play it. Not because I didn't care what she had to say, but because I already knew it would be filled with the same language, sadness without accountability, confusion without truth. She wasn't mourning me. She was mourning the version of her life where she didn't have to carry the weight. She spent years convincing herself she was the one in control, making decisions, setting boundaries, shaping the rhythm of our marriage. But the second I pulled out, the structure collapsed. Because control isn't power if you can't stand on your own. And now, she was standing in a house full of bills she never tracked, with a mortgage she didn't understand, utilities she never touched, and a man who no longer existed in her world, except as a silence that echoed back every time she asked, "Where did he go?" She hadn't lost a partner. She'd lost the version of herself that looked powerful next to me. That night, she posted a photo on social media. Old picture. Us at dinner. Smiling. Caption, "Sometimes people forget what they have until it's gone." It was bait. For sympathy. For attention. But the people who knew me didn't fall for it. Because the ones who watched me carry her knew the truth. I didn't leave because she failed. I left because she stopped trying. It didn't take long before she stopped pretending. 3 days after I walked out, the text changed. No more questions. No more passive lines about talking things through. She finally sent the message I'd been expecting. "Can you come back? Just for a few days. I'm overwhelmed." That word, overwhelmed, told me everything I needed to know. Because it wasn't about missing me. It was about needing a buffer again. Someone to absorb the pressure. Someone to blame when life felt heavy. But I wasn't that man anymore. The silence I gave her wasn't punishment. It was reflection. And it was working. The next day, she called my mother. Said she was worried about me. Said I had disappeared and was acting irrational. My mother asked her one question. "What exactly did you say that made him leave?" She hung up. No answer. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't sudden. This wasn't a meltdown. This was the result of years of micro-cuts, swallowed pride, and patience worn thin. I had stayed through her coldness, her indifference, the way she'd scroll through her phone while I talked, the way she'd roll her eyes when I showed affection, the way she'd brag about our life to friends while privately making me feel like I wasn't enough. Until I heard those 7 words. "I don't like him anymore." That's when I realized I didn't need to fix anything. I needed to walk away from everything. That week, I started rebuilding. Quietly. I got a new phone number. Only 5 people had it. I set up a P.O. box. Canceled every auto payment tied to my old address. Opened a new account under my name only. I didn't make noise. I made structure. Meanwhile, she spiraled. A friend of mine texted me. Said she ran into her at the grocery store. She looked tired. Worn out. Said she was talking fast, nervously, buying cleaning supplies and wine like she was trying to reset the atmosphere. But the problem wasn't in the air. It was in the mirror. Because no matter how clean the house was, no matter how many filters she used online, she couldn't cover up the one thing everyone could now see. She had a man who did everything. And she let him go because he stopped entertaining her. Now, she was entertaining herself with overdue bills and empty rooms. That's not karma. That's consequence. By the end of the first week, her tone had shifted completely. No more demands. No sarcasm. No subtle jabs hiding behind fake concern. She was unraveling. Not dramatically, not publicly, but in the way only someone who's never been alone before can fall apart. Quiet, confused, and completely lost in the very independence she used to romanticize. I saw it on her social media first. A quote posted on a white background. "Sometimes we take people for granted until they stop showing up." No name. No tag. Just implication. But I wasn't watching for her to break. I wasn't hovering over my phone, waiting for her next post or message. I wasn't invested in her damage. I was building something new. I'd started sleeping better, waking up early, eating cleaner. My workouts weren't rushed anymore. My thoughts weren't looping around her mood, her cold shoulder, her silence across the dinner table. Because her silence had been a weapon, mine was a shield. I visited my brother that weekend. We grilled, caught up. He looked at me halfway through the evening and said, "You're lighter." I just nodded. Because there's no need to explain freedom to someone who's watched you live without it. But back at her house, things were different. I didn't have to guess. Word started coming through people we knew. Friends who used to see her posting about our perfect life were now seeing the gaps, the absence, the cracks in her polished routine. She'd told one of them she was struggling financially, that she didn't expect it to be this hard. Of course she didn't, because she never understood how much of the weight I carried was invisible. The stability, the planning, the way I caught things before they became problems. It wasn't just money. It was structure. And when I left, that structure went with me. She thought the house was the foundation. It wasn't. I was. The next text came that Sunday night. Just 3 words. "Please come home." I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was tempted, but because I remembered a version of myself that would have jumped at the chance. The man who still believed she just needed more time. More love. More patience. That man was gone. He didn't leave out of hate. He left because she treated love like a background noise she could mute whenever she wanted. Now, the silence was hers, and it was louder than she ever imagined. Monday morning, I turned off the notifications. I didn't block her. That would have been emotional. I just silenced the noise. Because when someone only reaches out after they lose control, it's not connection thereafter, it's rescue. She didn't want me back because she loved me. She wanted me back because reality was finally louder than her ego. I took the morning slow. Coffee on the balcony. Clean air. No tension. I hadn't felt that kind of stillness in years. Not because it didn't exist, but because she never let it in. Everything with her was performative. Even her affection. It came in waves, timed for when others were watching. For when there were photos to post, comments to harvest, stories to craft. But real love? That's built in the quiet. And that's where she failed. That afternoon, I got an email, a long one. Pages of reflection. She called it an apology, but it read more like a resume of her intentions. Paragraphs of, "I didn't realize," "I didn't mean to," and "I never thought you'd actually leave." That last line, that was the truth. She didn't think I'd go. She thought she could say what she said, "I don't like him anymore," and that I'd absorb it. That I'd work harder, chase her, try to win her over like love was a contest, and she was the prize. But men like me don't beg to be wanted. We watch. We learn. We detach. And when we leave with everything. Our love, our time, our protection. And most importantly, our silence. Because silence doesn't mean weakness. It means calculation. It means control. She wanted me emotional, angry, desperate. Instead, I gave her a ghost. By Wednesday, she'd call my job. Not directly. She left a vague message with the front desk. Personal matter. Tell him it's important. They didn't even bother forwarding it. Because the people around me had already watched the transformation. They saw what I looked like before, drained, tired, invisible in my own life. Now, I was back, stronger, clearer, focused. And the irony? She built the version of me that finally left her. Every cold shoulder, every dismissive sigh, every backhanded compliment she thought I didn't hear, all of it sharpened the edge. She didn't lose me in a moment. She lost me slowly. Now she was just finally feeling it. By Friday, the silence had done more damage than any argument ever could. She'd stopped posting, stopped texting. Even the mutual friends, the ones who used to say things like, "She just needs time," or "Maybe you should talk it through," had gone quiet. Because they saw it now. Saw her unraveling. Saw what she looked like without the image she clung to so tightly. There were no curated smiles left to hide behind. Just a woman alone in the house she thought made her superior. And the truth? She never loved me. Not really. She loved the security. The optics. The idea of being adored without having to return it. The fantasy of being with a man who would always stay, even if she stopped showing up. And I did stay. longer than I should have. I stayed through the eye rolls, through the cold silences after I opened up, through the way she used intimacy like a reward for obedience. But the second I became inconvenient, too real, too tired, too human, she started pulling away. That's what she meant when she said, "I don't like him anymore." She didn't like that I was exhausted from carrying everything. Didn't like that I wasn't smiling through the weight. Didn't like that the man she ignored stopped performing. So I left the stage. And now she was in the audience, staring at the empty spotlight, waiting for a curtain call that would never come. That weekend, she showed up at my brother's place, unannounced. He told me later how she stood on the porch, makeup smeared, asking if I was there. He said no, not because I asked him to lie, but because I wasn't there. I was at a cabin 2 hours away, alone, phone off, journal open, writing down everything I'd forgotten about myself in that relationship, what I used to enjoy, what I stopped doing, who I was before her voice became louder than my own. It was the first time in years I felt free, not just single, not just detached, but truly free, from needing to be understood by someone who only saw value when I was useful. Back at the house, she sent one more message. "Please, just talk to me. Say anything." But I had nothing left to say, because she had spent years silencing me, with eye rolls, with withdrawal, with calculated indifference. Now she was learning the most brutal truth of all. When a man finally goes quiet, he's already gone. The call stopped by Monday. No more texts. No more guilt bait. No more attempts to repackage what happened into something softer. She finally realized the version of me she used to control. The man who waited for her to come around didn't live here anymore. He died the moment she said those 7 words, "I don't like him anymore." And I didn't resurrect him. I replaced him with someone who didn't need validation, with someone who didn't tolerate conditional affection, with someone who had nothing left to explain and everything to reclaim. That week, I sold the car we co-signed. My name was on the title. Hers wasn't. She didn't know that. She never cared enough to ask. I handed the keys to a dealership, took the check, bought a different vehicle. Simple, clean, fully mine. And with every mile I drove away from that version of my past, I felt something unfamiliar. Peace. Not the peace that comes from escape, the kind that's fleeting, but the peace that comes from full clarity. When you finally understand who someone really is and stop trying to turn them back into who they used to pretend to be. I heard from a friend that she tried spinning the story, said I ghosted her, said I left her without a word. But people knew better, because the truth doesn't need theatrics. It just needs space. And now that space was everywhere in her life. In the living room where I used to sit in silence, waiting for her to look up from her phone. In the kitchen where I used to cook dinner while she scrolled through social feeds, laughing at strangers' jokes, but barely noticing mine. In the bed where I used to face her back, listening to her breathe, wondering when she stopped caring. That space? It was hers now. And unlike me, it wasn't going anywhere. On Thursday, she tried again. A long email. She wrote that she understood now, that she should have appreciated more, that she let the wrong things get in the way. But understanding doesn't rewind time. Appreciation doesn't repair damage that's already been erased. And regret doesn't fix the fact that she didn't lose me because I changed. She lost me because I stopped accepting less than I gave. And once a man learns to live without that kind of imbalance, he never returns to it. She wanted to pretend this was just a rough patch. But it wasn't. It was her final exam. And she failed it by never showing up. By the start of the second week, I barely thought about her anymore. That's what hit her hardest. Not the silence, not the absence, but the reality that she no longer had access, not just to my presence, but to my attention. She used to live in a world where my world revolved around her. Even in conflict, even in frustration, I showed up. I engaged. I tried. Now, she was orbiting a version of me that had already exited the atmosphere. I heard from a coworker, someone who used to follow her online, that she deleted most of her photos, archived every picture of us, left just one, a grainy sunset. No people, no context, just a caption. You don't know what you have until it's gone. But the irony? She never really had me. She had control over a tired, loyal man trying to make love out of cold stares and empty praise. A man who used to confuse patience with progress, silence with stability. until I realized love shouldn't feel like survival. That same day, a legal envelope was delivered to her door. My name on the sender line. Nothing else. Inside, the divorce papers. Clean. Direct. Final. She didn't respond. Didn't text. Didn't call. She wasn't ready for that chapter to close. Not because she wanted the marriage, but because she wasn't prepared to be seen for who she was without it. But the most brutal endings? They don't need a witness. They just need truth. And the truth was, she had spent years building a fantasy version of love. One where effort was one-sided and praise was currency. One where I was supposed to keep showing up, even when she stopped being someone worth showing up for. Now, she was watching the empire fall. Quietly. Alone. Because there's no crowd for that kind of collapse. Only echoes. Echoes in the empty house. Echoes in the unsent messages. Echoes in the silence that follows when a man stops trying to prove his worth to someone who already decided he wasn't enough. I started seeing someone new that weekend. Not romantically, just coffee. A woman from the gym. Kind. Smart. Direct. She asked real questions. Laughed without performance. Looked at me like I wasn't something to fix, but someone to know. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like myself. Not the version that was constantly trying to be palatable. Not the man walking on eggshells just to be tolerable. Just me. Unfiltered. Focused. Free. Meanwhile, she stayed in the same house, with the same silence, trying to rebuild the illusion of control. But when you lose a man who loved you completely, there's no performance strong enough to cover that kind of vacancy. She didn't show up to the court date. No excuse. No explanation. Just absence. The same kind she practiced for years while I was still beside her, begging for connection she never planned to return. The judge didn't need much. The paperwork was clear. There was no contest, no claim, no request for reconciliation. Just a quiet signature on a life she never thought I'd walk away from. By noon, I was legally free. But the truth? I'd been free the moment I stopped explaining myself. Free from her moods, her passive critiques, the subtle looks that said I should feel lucky just to be tolerated. She made me believe I was hard to love, but all she really did was make love hard. And once I saw that, I stopped chasing the version of her I once fell for. The version that was warm in public, attentive in photos, and cold behind closed doors. That version never existed. It was marketing, packaging, performance. The real her was the silence after every honest word I offered. The dismissiveness when I asked for something simple, like presence. The disdain she couldn't fully hide when I talked about dreams that didn't include her applause. A week after the papers cleared, she texted again. It didn't have to end like this. But it did. Because endings don't come when people fall apart. They come when one person realizes the other was never really holding on. She held on to comfort, status, appearances, not me. And now she was holding a phone filled with unread messages and a contact that would never light up again. I changed my number that afternoon, not out of pettiness, but because closure isn't something I owed her. She closed that door the moment she chose to speak about me like I was disposable, like I was background noise in her life instead of the man who built it. She thought I was weak because I was quiet, but men like me don't need volume to disappear. We just act. And once we're gone, we don't leave breadcrumbs. We leave lessons. She'll tell herself I gave up too soon. But I didn't. I gave more chances than anyone should. And when the day finally came that I walked away, I didn't slam the door. I didn't burn the house down. I didn't curse her name. I just left her in the one place she never imagined she'd be without me. Alone with the sound of her own choices. And that silence? It's forever. Real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.